All right, welcome everybody. As Joe,
Raise your cup, your mug, your chalice, your glass, and join me in the simultaneous sip. One, two, three.
I feel like what's funny is sometimes I would be in that and I wouldn't have water or anything to drink, and I'm like, yay! All right, yeah. Let's see here. I want to make Bellen the host real quick, just in case anybody else jumps in. Awesome. All right. Happy to have you all here today. Today we're going to talk about what subjects you are bad at and when you learned that. And I want to even make it broader because subjects is such a schoolish term and life is so interconnected. It's not siloed in that way. So I want to talk about anything that you think that you're bad at as well. So let me start and let's start with a collective breath and a promise for openness and curiosity as always. Let's take a deep breath in. And now. Awesome. Throughout this session, please raise your hand if you have a question or you want to share anything about your story, because I think that's what this is about. I'm going to toy around with a new format, so I really want to hear more from you all. And as usual, I want to ground the space for community. I think most of us understand this, but this is a brave space with multiple truths. Everybody has something to contribute. We want to respect everybody's unique learning journey. We're all at different places. We want to practice grace if there's any misunderstandings or miscommunications or disagreements. It's a discrimination-free space, and we want to embrace the spectrum of self-directed learning and value and parenting. Cool. So again, as always, I want to say, please share any challenges or questions or thoughts that are coming up for anybody here as a guest or anybody in the audience, because that's kind of constantly what we want to talk about. But what subjects are you bad at? And when did you learn that? I want to start off, like I said, I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to share my story. I've given this a lot of thought over the last 4 or 5 years. And if you're interested as well, feel free to share yours. But I also want to hear your thoughts on everything that comes up for you from my story. Again, if that's something you want to share. So I'm gonna take you real quick as I can, through my formal education, if you will, and into life that I'm at now. So in grades K to 12, kindergarten to 12th, I was a great student. I paid attention. I wanted to listen, and I did listen really well. I was the first one with my hand up. I was generally way ahead of my peers, and I was acing tests, and those things were just generally easy for me, much to the chagrin of my peers at times, right? I was terrible at reading, which was really surprising to my parents because I memorized all the books that we had at home, and they thought I was reading already. So that was kind of like a sore spot for me. I had to go through like remedial reading classes while all of my other students or all of my other peers were in the classroom. I also had sloppy handwriting, but I was awesome at math, and all the way into high school, my SAT math score, like I was amazing. That was my strong point, and I really loved math too. But in high school, I stopped liking math, and my memory was terrible. So tests that judged my memory made me hate the things that I was being tested on, and this totally included math, right? I was awesome at creativity. I could come up with any ideas. Put me in like a prep room or a gifted room, and I was like amazing at anything. but I was terrible at providing like exact predetermined answers. And it didn't feel good to be wrong. All right. So moving forward into college, when I got to college, my first semester of classes were so hard that I was like, this is not for me. Maybe I should go home. I don't know. I didn't have the skills to be organized yet. I didn't have study skills because even in high school, for the most part, I wasn't studying and I didn't need to. I eventually worked up the stamina to keep up with like the workload and the reading assignments. Because remember, I wasn't good at reading, and kind of throughout school, I was kind of just keeping up with the reading assignments. I found a love of reading, studying abroad. I picked up Moby Dick, which is like a 600, 700 page book. And for some people, it's like the worst book that they have ever read. But for some reason, it just connected with me. And I was like, wow, like reading is like this. This one, I really connected with it. And from that point on, in the beginning of my senior year, I was like, okay, I'm going to start reading for myself now. And math was eventually fun again because I took kind of an applied math course that showed me Fibonacci numbers in nature and all this cool stuff that really just like my creativity lights were going off. And I was like, okay, all right, this is math again. This is why I liked math in the beginning. After college, I had trouble regulating kind of my daily life and finding purpose when not being told what to do anymore, because throughout school, even in college, it was like, okay, here, pick your classes, go to class, do well on the test. And then after that, I was like, well, what do I do now? I find a job and then just go to the job all the time. How do I find that job? How do I live my life? How do I regulate my creativity and my fun, my recreational side with the things that I want to accomplish and the money that I have to make. In a sense, I had to become self-directed to make a life for myself. And then kind of just a reflection on where I'm at now. I love learning, which wasn't always the case. I still have bad handwriting. It's terrible. My wife yells at me when I make grocery lists. She's like, "What's this word?" But I often are typing words, and most of my notes are for myself. I'm still figuring out how to be organized. I'm still figuring out how to find balance and regulate myself. I still have a terrible memory. And I know that's a bit like I'm labeling myself there, but I'm just gonna say it because that's what's in my mind right now. I still have awesome creativity. I love math. I love reading. I still get nervous around public math. That term public math is like when you're in front of somebody and they're like, hey, can you calculate this? And you're like, am I gonna get it right? Yeah, right. And I'm like, I can't do it right now. I'm not good at public math. Which is terrible because I feel like that's the wrong mindset to be in, to get something right, or the fear of failure, right, Joe? Still, I'm unreasonably afraid of being wrong sometimes. And I still hate close-ended questions and assignments. So I kind of wanted to just run you through my history, and I want you to see kind of what has brought me to this point. And yeah, I want you to think about that. And please, I want to hear from you. I invite your thoughts or your own stories, anything that connects with you about kind of my own story. Joe, go ahead.
I want to connect it, but in the process also introduce you to my friend Mark. So I resonate with some of that myself. The close-ended questions is perfect, and then it kind of points to this idea of like, wait, don't I have the freedom to have ideas myself? Can I have some input on the world? And you just don't get any of that in school generally. But a lot of my struggle early on, and sometimes I still feel like I'm wrestling with this, where going against the system or working against an existing structure and being unpredictable, even when it's not necessary. I'll just do it just because I feel like I need to be so free. And sometimes it makes it difficult for other people that are working with me. And so back to Mark. I think the other day I was at his house and I was giving him like one of my very long-winded compliments. Like you guys know I could do that sometimes. This one went on for like half an hour. And it was like he lives a life that's very unique. He's done a lot of things the way that his kids too. It's like imbued on his eldest son too, where he clearly has the freedom to live life how he wants, and takes initiative to do that. But at the same time, he's just so easy to get along with. Everybody likes him. He doesn't come across as a rebel. He comes across as a professional and somebody that you go to, you know, when you're struggling with anything, because he's so good at listening. So I'm still trying to grow up like that, Mark. That's why I look up to you.
That was a good intro. That was awesome.
You set everybody up for disappointment now. How do I live up to that intro? I'm not worthy. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, nice to join the group here. I've got I do have an adult son, and got 2 sons at home, so I'm very much interested in the topic here. There's so many interesting things going on in Wequal in so many rooms, and I've said I'm going to try to not read every project and join every room, even though that's my first inclination. But I've been very interested in some of the commentary and the articles and projects here, even though I've really only just scratched the surface. You know, since I've got the microphone now, I'll go ahead and share my own perspective. The thing that I can remember, first time I remember feeling I was bad at something and having that reinforced by being told I was bad at it or not trying hard enough, was definitely math. And I don't remember anything from preschool, kindergarten about math. But I remember probably it was first grade, and we had the mimeographed worksheets, and there were numbers and other numbers stacked underneath them, and then a line, and you were supposed to figure out, you know, what went under that line. And it didn't make a lot of intuitive sense to me, I think, looking back at the time. And then there was to be a lot of memorization. We have to memorize a lot of facts. And I think I probably inherently have a decent memory, but I'm good at remembering things that have some meaning and some context, and memorizing that this abstract number plus that abstract number equals this third abstraction didn't work out very well for me. And so I look back with a little bit of sorrow on, you know, how my life might have been different, because I can remember being told, well, Mark, you have so much interest in the sciences. And my father was an amateur scientist. But Mark, your math just isn't there. You're not ever going to be a scientist. You know, either you're going to buckle down and you're going to learn this math, or that's it. You know, you're in second grade now, and your career prospects have been foreclosed on. So as it turns out, yeah, I am not a scientist. I actually did end up having a career in finance, of all things. But my first career and my current career are in education. And so I've made kind of a conscious effort, particularly with now with my middle child, because I think I could have done better with my eldest in terms of kind of cultivated a love for math early on. So from as early as I could, I just, math is fun. When we're bathing, we're doing math because we're doing bath math, and we're gonna, there's gonna be some math in every aspect. And so by the time he got to where, now that he's in school, in elementary school, it's like, oh yeah, math is something like really great and interesting and fun and exciting. And I ran into somebody I knew in the coffee shop the other day, and I said, I almost feel like I could threaten him that, if you don't behave, I'm not going to let you solve any math problems. I printed something out for him the other day that was they call it math. It's like math problems, but it's more like, figuring out patterns. It's more like what we would have called brain teasers. Like I would have seen it in a book of brain teasers when I was a kid. It doesn't seem to me to be overtly what we think of as math. But anyway, I had these printouts, and he said, ooh, math, or ooh, problems. So I think I'm doing okay so far in that department. So wish me well there, and I really look forward to hearing what all of you have to share.
Awesome, Mark. Thank you so much. That I love that. That adds a good story to the mix, and that's what I'm looking for, kind of a diversity of stories. Rebecca, did you want to talk?
Yeah, I think your story, Mark, was like the perfect segue for me, and also connecting to Dan, because I feel like, Dan, you and I had sort of the opposite school experience in terms of you struggling with reading initially and then loving math initially. I always loved reading, and it came easily, and my family always encouraged that. We were always reading, and math, on the other hand, was always a challenge for me. And I always found it to be both boring and meaningless and difficult. And I guess the teachers that I had that I can remember, like actually remember most of my math teachers, but not in a good way. I felt that they were always, it made sense to them, and they expected that it made sense to me if they explained it one way one time. And I was often in like the remedial math classes. I remember throughout middle and high school, I always had a tutor. I always had to stay after, and I always had to work so hard just to practically, make a C. Whereas most of my other classes, minimal effort and pretty great results. So that led me on to, once I got to high school, and I realized that I actually love language, and Spanish was very exciting to me, and it came more naturally. And I was also just, I loved communicating and cultures. And so I decided, or my parents supported me in this, that why don't you take the upper level Spanish classes, more advanced Spanish, and not worry about math so much. And so I went on to like a liberal arts college, and really didn't see math again, to be quite honest. I only needed a little bit of math my freshman year for logic. I took logic classes just because that was a philosophy math course, and then went on to study anthropology and language and culture. And yeah, I learned that, like, I guess math was something I needed to some extent to, manage my finances and shop and budget. But to be honest, I didn't really ever use it as a teacher. And my own kids, maybe like you said, I thought it was fascinating, Mark, that you said you made math like part of like your kids' learning. And I know, Joe, you have too. I guess because that wasn't my experience, reading was always what we did, and like writing stories and talking, and that was just more, my passion and my bent. And lo and behold, my kids hate math, and I never told them to hate math. But I think they had a similar school experience as I did. And so now we're trying to sort of relearn that together and find the value in it, in a non-schoolish way.
I first want to say, woohoo, anthropology.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
I love that story, and it brings a lot to mind in terms of our mindsets around something and how it's in some ways like inheritable, how we pass it off, whether we know that we're passing it off or not. And it kind of lives not in the negative messaging necessarily that we have. Like, Rebecca, you're not walking around saying, I hate math, I'm not doing this in front of your kids. But maybe you're not also doing math activities in the tub like Mark was talking about because that's just fun for you. Because it's not. You're like, well, I kind of want to stay away from math. This is not fun for me. And it's hard to say objectively that math is not fun for you, but it might be easier to say that math was made not fun for you in a certain way, but you actually might really like math if you got into it, with the right teacher, with the right resources, with the right open mindset.
Yeah, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else want to share their story or any thoughts on this?
Or Elizabeth.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I'm having some internet trouble, so let me know if I'm like glitching out here. But yeah, well, I was thinking about it, and like growing up in school, I actually I did not have trouble with any particular subjects. I love to read. I enjoy math. Now, there were things I didn't like about it, like what you said about not liking the kind of closed end questions. I've always hated that part of it. Like, I always knew I enjoyed reading, but I didn't want to, like, what you do in school is you read something and then they ask you some pointed questions about what you read. And they always made us write the answers in complete sentences, which I found to be a complete waste of time. So mostly my experience with school was just not that I didn't enjoy math or reading, or I just was kind of bored with all the things that they made us do with it overall. And so that was what I actually got in trouble with, was the not completing stuff or lack of focus or looking out the window, which I now relate to issues with ADHD. Yeah, it was more, the not being able to go where I wanted to with it, I suppose. Yeah, those kind of, they give you all this information, but then they have a very distinct place they want you to go with it, and that's all. And if you can't do that, then yeah, they're not happy with you. So
I love that. Thanks for sharing, Elizabeth. It brings up something, and I know Joe wants to talk, so this is perfect. Joe has a saying, he says, you love what you're good at, right? And what's interesting is I think that's not always true in my experience. And Elizabeth, it seemed like you were good at school, but you didn't love it. And I had a similar experience, but I couldn't put it into words when I was in school. I could only put it into words after we started unschooling, and after I started picking apart school, and after I started going through my teaching certification course, that I started thinking like, oh, that's what this felt like. I was kind of blocking this out for a while. This wasn't the best thing for me. And I was great at it, but the truth was I didn't love it. I loved getting the attention for being good at it, but not necessarily the experience. Take it away, Joe.
Oh boy. So I just didn't even know what math was until I was getting my master's and writing a dissertation on it was a 110-page long, very complex. There's like a theoretical mathematical model and then a giant statistical model to back it up, all with the goal of trying to explain the relationship between tax rates and the resulting wages in states. And it was very complicated because there's so many factors. And it was one of the, I just never actually used math to do anything. And I mean, like, really do something. Like, I'm not talking about just trying to tally up your taxes or something, but to find some objective way of understanding the complexity of our reality in a way that's measurable and you can communicate. I mean, to try to communicate that model in English, you could literally talk for months and still not be able to communicate it, because English just doesn't communicate that very well. But math, you can. It's just an equation. And like you look at like, well, what causes people to enjoy something? Well, that's a really complicated concept. We could do it. We could do an entire mathematical model and back it up with statistics on that too, because the number of factors that play into what drives curiosity and what makes somebody feel positive emotions around a particular subject is so dense. But one of those factors is if you're good at it. So does that mean that you like everything you're good at? No, because there are so many factors that go into what drives curiosity. But it's one of the more important factors, I think. All else equal, when people know more about a subject, they tend to like it more. But of course, there's plenty of things that people know a lot about, and maybe they had to do it for work and they have to do it all the time and 9 to 5 for years and then it just like made them hate whatever they were doing. You know, it's complicated. That's my answer.
Thank you. That adds so many facets to that saying, and I feel like I can understand it more now. And I agree with that. Yeah. It's easy to find kind of the ways that things people say don't work. It's easy to be like critical about like this, but what about this instance? And what about this instance, right? But that adds a lot more facet to it. Yeah, that's nice. Anybody else want to add anything else? Any other thoughts about this conversation? Because a lot that came up for me when I kind of looked through my history with education, and we can almost put that in quotes, what education is, right? A lot of it, what for me came down to a fixed mindset and learned helplessness. And I was thinking about these two, and I'll kind of quickly define them in my own terms. A fixed mindset means that you think there's only one way that you are about something, whether you're good or you're bad. And whether or not you're good or you're bad, it's both the wrong mindset, that there isn't possibility for growth. When you're in school, like I was, and I was behind on reading, my fixed mindset, what I started to integrate into my own being was that I was bad at reading. The truth was, school has a very arbitrary timeline for a lot of these skills, and it's much easier to just say, hey, kindergarten, first grade, whatever it is. And you can tell that it's arbitrary because 30 years ago, they were not teaching any sort of reading fundamentals in kindergarten. And now they totally are. And you start to seem like a bad student if you're not reading well in kindergarten. So fixed mindset, whether you're good or not, when I felt like I was bad, I felt like there was no possibility that I would be on the good side. So I didn't really try. And I also kind of had this stigma about reading. But on the good side, for math, for me, I still had a fixed mindset about that because I was good at math. And do you know what? Anything that challenged the possibility that I was not good at math was a scary thing for me. And the research backs this up, that that those with a fixed mindset will avoid things that challenged their fixed kind of goodness or their fixed capacity to do something well. So public math for me, if I'm not doing that well in front of somebody, then I'm labeling myself or reading, like kind of projecting a label from somebody else onto me that I'm actually not good at math. And that's scary, considering that's my identity, that I'm good at math. Right, the learned helplessness is a lot about when you are taught that you can't do something or that you're bad at something, you just learn that and you accept that. But in terms of like what we understand about neuroscience, that is so not true, that there's always room for growth in so many different ways. Yeah, any thoughts on that, Mark?
Yeah, it made me think about how this relates back to raising kids or teaching kids. And yeah, I saw a video sometime back. I think it was a young person, maybe he was still a teenager even, or young, very young man, talking about what it was like growing up being a gifted child and having the label of a gifted child, and how in some ways it was burdensome, and being a gifted child makes you you're a special needs child. In some ways it's almost like a disability, or at least the way you would approach them is in some ways the way that you would approach providing service to a disabled child. And even more generally for children, you know, I make a conscious effort never to tell kids, wow, you're really smart. Wow, you got that right. You're so smart. Oh, you know all these things. You are so smart. Because when when the child gets used to all these external praise and reinforcement and whatever, as soon as they come up with something they can't solve right away or can't understand right away, now they have this kind of cognitive dissonance. It's like, well, I'm supposed to be smart, but this is hard. I think I'll just avoid that. All right, I'm done. It didn't come easy, so it's not worth doing. So in a way, we maybe set kids up for failure, certainly by, you know, and I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know. Praise the effort, not the, you know, not the result, or say that you're just inherently smart. But also that help the kids to, you know, to build and they have an internal sense of worth or sense of value in doing something, or that things are worth doing because I want to do them, and it's an expression of my creativity, or I find value in it. Okay, so I'll stop there.
Mark, that's an integral part of this conversation. So thanks for adding that in. And I want to say also, in terms of smartness, when we say you're smart and it gives that fixed mindset, there's also, oh, look how cute you are, right? Which is often something for girls. And then that also becomes a fixed mindset and is the opposite of empowering children to be who they want to be on the inside, having inherent traits, exactly as you said, Mark. Thank you. Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
Well, just from what I've seen throughout my life and in my experience with my kids, I feel like, you know, curiosity and motivation just have so much to do with whether somebody is good or not at something, or wants to be good at it. Like the other day I was telling, you know, you were there, I was telling Isla how I'm not very good at technology, and she didn't like that I said that. But you know, the truth is I'm just not super curious or motivated to learn about technology. I am doing more of it now because I'm having to use technology to do what I'm doing. But I think we need to give our kids also the freedom, or anybody the freedom, to like just not really want to be good at something. You know, sometimes the curiosity and the motivation just isn't there. And I saw like my father with his life's work was in something that he was told he did not have an aptitude for, but they underestimated his motivation and curiosity to do it, and he succeeded with things. It was in linguistics, learning a language that no one else had ever learned before. And you know, he had motivation to do that was stronger than his apparent not aptitude, but he did it.
It sounds like a little bit of Mark's story, where he was told he would never be someone good at math, and he's doing something related to math, and that was his career, right? Joe, what are your thoughts?
Well, so my daughters have most definitely been brainwashed into the belief that time and effort will dictate the outcome of their lives and their progress. But in terms of that particular, because she told me about it, if you had worded it slightly differently, she would have been totally cool with it. If you had said, well, I'm not particularly interested in learning more about technology, then they have great respect for the strengths and interests and passions of individuals. They've been brainwashed into that too from a very young age. But they have also been, they're very keenly aware, and they will notice immediately if somebody says that there is some external factor that is outside of their control, that is the reason why they cannot do something. And they will immediately shut it down. They've been doing that that's been like a core strategy that they've used since they started Weekable School 3.5 years ago too, because it basically is the opposite of empowerment.
Wow, that's funny. And I laughed when you were talking about how you selectively brainwash your kids. That's such a Joe thing to say. I love it. Yeah, it really kind of pulls more from what Elizabeth was saying in terms of interest. Here's one of the kids now. In terms of interest versus like aptitude or skill level at something. And yeah, it just makes me reflect that, yeah, I think, Elizabeth, that is a really important thing to highlight here, that if you're not interested, it's okay to not be interested in things, right? Yeah, I think we have like maybe about a minute left or so. Any other thoughts or last comments that coming up?
Well, sharing is caring. My daughter's brainwashed me into that. Yeah.
That's a shakedown phrase. I see little kids doing that. Hey, sharing is caring. Sharing is caring. I mean, you have something, I want it, so give it here. Yeah, I guess I think that's a parent thing. It not in my household, but yeah, I think some parents are teaching their kids, yeah, sharing is caring, so then they can turn that around to extort their peers.
We just use daddy tax here, and then my son Kai started using kid tax, and I was like, I can't even argue with that now. All right, I think we'll close up here, guys. Thank you for guys and girls. Thank you for the awesome conversation. And if you have any thoughts on kind of this new conversational format, feel free to message me in the app or leave a note in the discussion board. But thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.